Hello, folks. My name's Kathy Ace. I'm the author of the Kate Morgan Mysteries, the Wise Inquiries Agency Mysteries, and a dark psychological thriller called The Wrong Boy. That one's set in Wales, as are the Wise Inquiries Agency Mysteries, and that's where this accent's from as well, though now I'm a Canadian. Hey, I'm listening to the Dark and Stormy Book Club podcast. Are you? If not, you know what you should do? Listen. It's great. Enjoy!
Hello, and welcome to episode 213 of Dark and Stormy Book Club. It's that time again. What are we reading? Enjoy.
I'm Ann Dart.
I'm Tracy Stormy.
And I'm Kathy Knight.
And together we are
It Was a Dark and Stormy Book Club,
a podcast for mystery lovers.
Welcome.
If you enjoy our show, please consider contributing to the Dark and Stormy Patreon. By becoming a patron, you will help us create better and quality content. There are also benefits to becoming a patron, such as exclusive content and Dark and Stormy merchandise. Become a supporter at patreon.com/darkandstormybc. Check our website for the link. We appreciate any and all contributions. Thank you.
Hello. And we are excited to be back together in the studio, or sort of in the studio, to talk about what we're reading for the month of May. And Kathy, would you like to start?
The book I was reading is called Blood Royal, a true tale of crime and detection in medieval Paris. It's by Eric Jager, and I listened to it on audio. It was narrated by Renee Aubergenois. It was published on February 25th, 2014 by Little Brown and Company, and Hachette Audio put out the audiobook. From the introduction, quote, in the 1660s, an unusual parchment scroll was discovered at an old chateau in the French Pyrenees. 30 feet long and filled with small, neat script, the scroll had been lost for more than 2.5 centuries. It was the original police report on a high-level assassination whose violent repercussions had nearly destroyed France, unquote. By 1407, Louis of Orleans had accumulated a bevy of detractors and enemies amongst his family, high-born nobles, and the general populace. His brother, the King of France, Charles VI, suffered from bouts of what is today supposed to have been paranoid schizophrenia, and Louis served as regent during these sometimes month-long spells. In this capacity, Louis held much sway over the royal court, most of whom were relatives, and used that power to persuade the court to levy heavy taxes on the populace to fuel his profligate spending. He was a licentious womanizer who delighted in flaunting his seductions of their wives to the nobles themselves. As Charles's illness resulted in a rift between he and his queen Isabeau, Louis spent a great deal of time with the queen, which spurred rumors that they were having an affair. Consequently, when Louis was massacred by a well-organized band of men on November 23, 1407, there were many suspects to consider. As Provost of Paris, the investigation fell to Guillaume de Tignonville. De Tignonville, as a high-born knight appointed by the king himself to the post, which was essentially equivalent to the chief of police. As such, he enjoyed a great deal of personal power. During a time when witchcraft was believed to be a common practice, and torture was not only allowed, but also more than likely used by Tignonville previously. The investigation of Louis's assassination does not so much as hint of its use here, however. The inquiry was conducted over the course of several days without benefit of modern forensic tools, but with copious interviews with many witnesses and good old deductive reasoning. Eric Jager masterfully presents the course of the search for the perpetrators as presented in the scroll, which allows a glimpse into the daily lives of ordinary Parisians at the time. De Tignonville was not only able to identify the culprit, but to cleverly get him to confess. Unfortunately, solving this crime came at a great personal cost to de Tignonville and brought about civil war throughout France. Taking advantage of the vulnerabilities of France at this crucial time allowed England to invade and occupy France for decades to come. This tale is told in the style recognizable today as a modern detective story, as first established in 1841 when Edgar Allan Poe published The Murders in the Rue Morgue. Centuries earlier, the brutal murder of Louis, Duke of Orleans, was investigated by Guillaume de Tignonville. The priceless scroll chronicles that investigation and points to the possibility that de Tignonville is one of written history's first detectives. Jager skillfully keeps the reader on edge as the case progresses, and through copious research, details the historically significant consequences of this single savage act. I highly recommend this book for lovers of history and mystery alike.
Oh, that sounds really good.
Very interesting.
It really, really was very good.
It hits upon a couple different hot buttons for me. You know, the history, and then got the crime in there, and that sounds really interesting.
It really, really was. And it certainly kept me on the edge of my seat. Listening to it was just like listening to any detective story written today. And it was true.
I love that. Did the person who was reading it have a French accent?
No, René Auberjonois is famous.
Comedian.
He played in, remember Benson? He was not a pleasant character.
He was the bad guy in the series.
Benson was the butler for the governor at the time, and Renee played
his chief of staff.
Yeah, something like
and
that.
And he was always trying to get Benson fired.
This was going back to the, 1970s? Obviously, he's of French descent, and as far as I could tell, he pronounced all the French. There were French phrases. He spoke them what I considered with the French accent, so he does not have a French accent when he's speaking English.
Huh.
Sounds like one who might have to check out.
Has this author written any other?
I will tell you about this author. There's not much of a presence for him. He has no website or social media presence, but Eric Jager is an award-winning professor of English at UCLA. He holds a PhD from the University of Michigan and is the author of The Last Duel, The Book of the Heart, and The Tempter's Voice, as well as numerous articles for acclaimed academic journals, and he lives in Los Angeles. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear that he's written anything after 2014, after this book. Maybe he's just concentrating on teaching.
Maybe he had a passion and just felt the need to put it to paper.
I think The Last Duel takes place in medieval France as well, I believe. And The Book of the Heart is about medieval iconography. The Tempter's Voice is simply an academic type journal, as far as I could tell. I would like to at least check out The Last Duel and see that. It seems to be similar in vein to this book.
Oh, okay.
Well, thank you, Kathy. And if I hadn't said it before, we're glad to have you back with us.
Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'm going to visit an old friend in my book. The Silent Sisters is the third in the Charles Jenkins books by Robert Dugoni. It was put out by Thomas and Mercer on February 22nd, 2022. We talked to Robert way back when he put out his first book.
See, I know what she does. She waits for what we're reading, and then she goes and grabs her favorite authors.
Darn right I did. And it was called Eighth Sister. It features a gentleman named Charles Jenkins. This is the third book in the series, and Charles Jenkins, of course, gets called back to Russia again after he's been home for a while, and he's sort of retired, but he gets pulled in from the same people, the good old CIA, and the Eight Sisters. If you remember the last book, he had to go save one of the Eight Sisters who was in a prison, and he almost lost his life in that one and just barely made it out of Russia by the skin of his teeth. After a harrowing escape from Russian agents on his last mission, Charles Jenkins thinks he's finally done with the spy game. But then the final two of the 7 remaining sisters, who are American assets who have been undercover in Russia for decades, cut off all communication with their handlers. Are they in hiding after detecting surveillance, or have they turned and become double agents? It's Jenkins' duty to find out, but he's been added to a Russian kill list, and it will require all of Jenkins' knowledge and spycraft and an array of disguises to return to the country undetected. If anyone who hasn't read any of these books, Charles Jenkins is not your typical spy. He's a black man, number one, and he's 6'5". So he has to disappear in a country of short people who are predominantly white. But plans go awry the first night in Moscow when Jenkins gets involved in an altercation that ends in the death of the son of one of Russia's most powerful organized crime leaders. So now he's being pursued by Russian agents, the dogged Moscow police, as well as the mafia family that rules Moscow. They're all after Charles Jenkins. And he has to go and track down the final 2 sisters and get them out of Russia or die trying. And Jenkins feels that this time he might have pushed his luck too far. I love the character of Charles Jenkins.
I do too.
Just amazing. The characters in his books become real. You just feel like you know Charles. The story involves Putin. You've heard of him?
Oh,
A little
who?
bit.
Yeah, I know. He's just a little up and comer. He has some people that are after Charles also. You feel the anxiety and the pain. You're holding your breath, hoping they're going to make it out of the country. This is just an excellent, excellent 3rd volume in this series. I can't wait for the next Charles Jenkins. I know he probably won't go back to Russia, but there's a big world out there, and it was a story you could not put down. Do you remember Victor, the police?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He is in this story also. He makes a perfect Watson to Charles Sherlock. I just hope there's a 9th sister somewhere in Russia waiting to be rescued, and Robert's going to send Charles in again to get him.
And if our listeners would like to know more about Robert, we interviewed him.
Episode 70 in July of 2019.
I have
Yes.
a question.
Yes.
I don't remember in the 8th Sister that Charles Jenkins was much of a master of disguise.
He doesn't, because he had never been in that situation. But in the 2nd and the 3rd books, he has to become several people, such as a little old man. I don't know how he does that as a 6'5" black man.
But he is elderly. He was in his 60s at least in the first one. I don't know.
Hey, to Mom, that's not elderly.
That's true.
He's a young kid.
He's at retirement age.
Oh my gosh, I'm almost 60. What am I saying?
If you read these books, it's best to read them in order. This roller coaster ride is well worth it, but if you pick up the 3rd book, you will miss out on a lot of the backstory. But I highly recommend Robert's books.
Yes, I do too.
And he is at robertdegoni.com.
Next up, I have a book. Our good friend Anna Sacco sends us all kinds of books. She's from FSB Associates. I saw this book called Dry Heat, and